Welcome back to the channel. I'm Tim and I appreciate you stopping by. Got a quick tip today for owners of certain year model General Motors products experiencing a low oil pressure reading or no oil pressure reading on the gauge. Also may be accompanied by a low oil pressure message, warning message on the driver's information display. And you may or may not have a check engine light illuminated and or stored codes P0521 and P0523. Basically, this tip is going to apply to 2005 through 2011 year model Silverados, Tahoes, Suburbans, Avalanches, TrailBlazers, and then GMC Sierras, Tahoes, Yukons, Yukon XLs and Denali, and even Buick Rainier and other vehicles with the 5.3 and 6.0 motors. So two most common issues that cause this problem are, one, the oil pressure sensor itself, and then below the oil pressure sensor there's a little screen that becomes restricted and clogged. If all of a sudden you went from having normal oil pressure to absolutely no oil pressure, I would suspect the sensor itself. But if you've slowly noticed a decrease in oil pressure that's indicated by the gauge, then I'd lean more towards a clogged screen. But I would recommend replacing both at the same time. Super handy to have a scan tool with the ability to view the data PID for oil pressure and actually see what the computer is seeing coming from the sensor as far as the pressure. This vehicle is a 2007 Chevy Suburban equipped with the 5.3 motor. Okay, we're going to connect our scan tool and we'll monitor the engine data. We'll just go to engine data and find our oil pressure, engine oil pressure switch, oil pressure sensor, PSI. We're at, start things up here. Oh wow, measuring 129 PSI, which is quite high. It's definitely an erroneous reading. So if you're getting an erroneous reading at the data or no reading at all, we're going to need to pull the oil pressure switch, which is located at the back of the intake. It calls for removing the intake in order to access it, but we found a way to get to it without completely doing that. I'll start by just pulling this engine cover off, and then I'll show you what else you have to do. Okay, first you want to remove this PCV hose, the back corner of the motor. Get that out of the way. Then you go ahead and remove the brake booster hose and just pull that up out of the way. Now we want to remove both ends of the evap line, which runs down the back. So on the engine side up top, you want to depress the small gray or light colored plastic keeper and slide the hose back. Now you got to do the same on the back side, which is down behind the bell housing area. Now we're going to disconnect the fuel line so we can move that out of the way. Just move that little keeper and use a fuel line quick disconnect tool. Now you reach around behind and disconnect the electrical connector to the sensor. Once you remove the electrical connector, you want to use a socket to remove the sending unit. Okay, once you get the sender electrical connector disconnected, Here's the setup I used to get behind there. Basically an 1 1/16 socket, deep 1/2 inch, and then just a whatever 4-inch, 1/2 inch drive extension. Then I adapted it to 3/8 and then put a little wobble socket on it. It's a little bit difficult to get to. Again, you could just remove the intake if you had the time and didn't mind, you know, doing it. It's a lot easier to get to that way. This is kind of a pain in the butt, but it will save you a little bit of time. So once you get the sender out, then you want to take a pick, and this one has just a little 45-degree, and basically down in where the sender came out of and pierce through the little screen, and then pull out on the little screen insert, the little filter. So here's the filter that I removed, and you know, it looks pretty clean. There's no contaminants built up on here. There's no metal particulate. Here's the replacement filter. So that just inserts, goes that way down in the hole, and then thread in your replacement sender and then tighten it up. Okay, I should back up though a bit, because at this point, you know, if you have access to a mechanical gauge, you should put a gauge on there and actually do a physical mechanical reading of the oil pressure. So then if you're getting good oil pressure at this point, go ahead and I would replace the screen and the sender. So to check and make sure that the gauge is okay in the cluster, you can jumper the gray wire to the tan and black wire on the connector here, and then turn on the ignition, and you should get a high pressure oil reading. If that's the case, then go ahead and replace the sender and the screen, and that should correct the issue. Okay, once you've reinstalled the filter and the sender, tighten that down and reconnected the connector and your hoses, go ahead and clear the codes. Let's go ahead and start the engine and verify the repairs. Normal pressure reading on the dash. No more check engine light. Let's go ahead and look at the data again. Engine oil pressure sensor is reading 59 pounds. Looks good. All right, that pretty much wraps this one up. One thing to note, if you're working on like a Chevy Impala with this motor and this particular issue, it's a lot easier to access the oil pressure switch on that one. You know, especially for a fat guy like myself, laying up over this radiator support and accessing it, it's kind of a pain, but it's worth it over pulling the intake to access it. There's some people that have cut away the little plastic shield in the very back to access it. I don't recommend doing that, but you know, if you use the little tool combination that I used, the little socket and the wobbly, you should be able to get at it. Just have a little patience there. So anyway, I appreciate you stopping by. I hope this tip was helpful, and for more money-saving tips and tricks like this, subscribe now to the Car Doctor channel, and I'm going to wish you good luck with your repairs. Have a good one.